In a small mountain town where respect seemed like a forgotten value, a group of violent bikers thought they'd found an easy target. A 72-year-old veteran running a modest roadside coffee stand. They didn't know they were about to start a war they couldn't win, one that would transform not just their lives, but an entire community. This is the story of how Frank Morrison, former Marine Force Recon, showed a gang of troublemakers that true strength isn't about intimidation, but about bringing people together. Hey there! Before we begin, share where you're watching from down below, and if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow, we've got something even more exciting lined up for you. The morning mist clung to the mountains as Frank Morrison wiped down his coffee stand's weathered wooden counter. The familiar scent of fresh brewed coffee mingled with crisp mountain air, a combination that had drawn travelers to his small establishment for 15 years. His movements were deliberate but efficient, each motion reflecting the discipline earned during his years in Marine Force Recon. "Morning, Mr. Morrison." Jenny Parker, a local high school student, called out as she rode past on her bicycle. "Mom says she'll bring more of her banana bread later." "Tell her there's always free coffee waiting for her, Jenny," Frank called back, smiling as he watched the teenager pedal away. The regulars knew his stand was more than just a business. It was a piece of the community's heart. Mrs. Henderson pulled up in her old station wagon, right on schedule at 6:15 a.m. She'd been his first customer when he opened the stand, and she hadn't missed a morning in 15 years. "The usual, Frank?" she asked, holding out her thermal mug, "and maybe one of those cinnamon rolls Sarah dropped off?" "Coming right up, Helen. How's the flower shop doing?" "Oh, you know how it is. Not as busy as it used to be, but we manage." "Speaking of managing, did you hear about those bikers causing trouble down in River Creek?" Frank's hands paused briefly as he poured her coffee. "Can't say that I have. What kind of trouble?" "Bad kind. They've been demanding protection money from small businesses. Poor old Tom had to close his hardware store after they vandalized it. Police say they can't do much without evidence." "Times are changing," Frank said quietly, but his voice carried a weight that made Mrs. Dear Henderson look up from her coffee. "Just be careful, Frank. They say these aren't your regular motorcycle enthusiasts. They call themselves the Crimson Cobras. Real nasty bunch." Frank nodded, his mind drifting to another time when he'd faced down threats far worse than local troublemakers. Worlds full of people who mistake fear for respect, Helen. Never ends well for them. As Mrs. Henderson drove away, Frank reached under his counter, passed the guest book filled with messages from grateful customers, and touched the small business card he'd kept there for decades. It carried a single phone number, a connection to brothers who understood that some battles don't end when you take off the uniform. The morning continued peacefully. Truckers stopped for his famous Warriors Wake-Up Brew, tourists asked for directions, and locals shared news and gossip. Frank's coffee stand, perched perfectly on a curve of Mountain View Road, had become a welcome sight for anyone traveling through these parts. Around mid-morning, the peaceful routine shattered. The rumble started as a distant thunder, growing louder until it drowned out the gentle mountain breeze. 6 motorcycles roared into view, their chrome gleaming aggressively in the sunlight. Frank watched as his current customers, a young mother with 2 children and an elderly truck driver, quickly finished their drinks and left, avoiding eye contact with the newcomers. The bikers pulled into the gravel parking area, their formation practiced but sloppy to Frank's trained eye. Their leader, a tall man with a leather vest bearing a Crimson Cobra insignia, dismounted first. His boots crunched on the gravel as he approached the stand, a practiced sneer on his face. "Nice little setup you got here, old-timer," he said, his voice carrying the false sweetness of a predator toying with its prey. "Coffee is $4, Frank responded calmly, continuing to wipe down the already clean counter. "Military veterans get their first cup free." The biker leader laughed, the sound echoing off the mountain walls. "Name's Viper, and we're not here for coffee, Pops. We're here to discuss your new protection fee. See, this road's now Crimson Cobra territory, and businesses need our insurance." Frank studied the man before him, noting the way the other bikers spread out in an amateur attempt at tactical positioning. So the only protection this stand needs is already provided by the men and women in uniform who patrol these roads. Viper's face darkened. One of his men knocked over a stack of cups, while another ran his fingers through the display of Sarah's fresh-baked goods, smearing the frosting. "Let me be clear, old man." Viper growled, leaning over the counter. $500 a week, or accidents start happening. Lots of dangerous curves on this mountain road. Frank sat down his cleaning cloth and met Viper's gaze. The younger man flinched involuntarily, recognizing something in the veteran's eyes, the kind of strength that comes not from causing fear, but from facing it. "Let me be equally clear," Frank replied, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had commanded others in combat. "This stand opens every morning to serve this community. It's been here 15 years, and it'll be here tomorrow. Now, either order some coffee or move along." Viper grabbed one of Sarah's cinnamon rolls and crushed it in his fist. "Wrong answer, Pops. We'll be back tonight to teach you how things work. Maybe we'll start with that flag you seem so proud of." As the bikers roared away, Frank reached for the business card under his counter. The number belonged to the Veterans Motorcycle Association, an organization of former military riders who had served in various conflicts. Frank had helped the founder during a particularly rough time after Vietnam, and they'd given him the card with a simple message: brotherhood never expires. Looking at the crumbled remains of Sarah's cinnamon roll, Frank smiled slightly, remembering something his old commanding officer used to say: "Sometimes the biggest mistake a bully can make is choosing the wrong person to intimidate." He picked up his phone and dialed the number. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Mac speaking. "Mac, this is Frank Morrison, Force Recon 6773, about that favor you've been wanting to repay." The Crimson Cobras were about to learn a harsh lesson about the difference between causing fear and commanding respect. Mac's gruff voice softened with recognition. "Frank Morrison? The Frank Morrison from the Khe Sanh Siege? Brother, I've been waiting 15 years for this call." "Never thought I'd need to make it, Mac, but times change and some people need reminding about respect." "Talk to me, Frank. What's the situation?" Frank detailed the morning's events, his voice steady as he described the Crimson Cobra's threats. On the other end of the line, Mac listened silently, though Frank could hear his breathing grow heavier with each detail. "They threatened your flag?" Mac's voice had turned to steel. "Your stand's on Mountain View Road, right? Give me 2 hours and Frank, stay put. Family's coming." The rest of the morning passed with an unusual tension in the air. Regular customers noticed Frank's changed demeanor, though his hands remained steady as ever while pouring coffee. Sarah, his daughter, arrived around 11 with a fresh batch of cinnamon rolls. "Dad?" She noticed the crushed pastry still on the counter. "What happened here?" "Just some misunderstanding with new customers," Frank replied, not wanting to worry her. "How's Tommy doing in school?" "Dad." Sarah's tone matched his own command voice from years ago. "I know that look. It's the same one you had when those drug dealers tried setting up shop near Tommy's school last year. What's really going on?" Before Frank could answer, the distant rumble of motorcycles echoed through the mountains again. Sarah tensed, but Frank placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said, a slight smile crossing his face. "Those aren't the same bikes from this morning." 3 motorcycles appeared around the bend, their riders moving with military precision. The lead bike, a pristine Harley-Davidson, pulled up directly in front of the stand. Its rider, a tall woman with silver hair tied back in a tight braid, dismounted with practiced ease. The patch on her leather vest read, "Iron Mom, Desert Storm." "Colonel Sarah Martinez retired," she announced, approaching the stand and rendering a crisp salute. "Mac sent us ahead to assess the situation. Rest of the family's about an hour out." Frank returned the salute. "At ease, Colonel. Coffee?" "Wouldn't miss it. Mac says your brew got him through some rough nights after Nam." She turned to Sarah. "You must be Frank's daughter. Your father saved Mac's life back in '69. Never talks about anything else at our meetings." "Meetings?" Sarah looked between them. "Dad, what's going on?" Iron Mom smiled, but there was steel behind it. "We're the Veterans Motorcycle Association. Your father's been a Silent Guardian member since he helped found it. Today, we're returning the favor." The other two riders had taken up positions at either end of the parking area, their movements casual but purposeful. Both wore similar vests with military patches and campaign ribbons. "Mike, take a ride down to River Creek," Iron Mom called out. "Check on Tom's hardware store. Pete, head up to the Overlook. I want to know when our guests return." Sarah grabbed her father's arm. "What guests? Dad, you're scaring me." "Some local troublemakers think they can extort protection money from businesses along this road," Frank explained, his voice gentle but firm. "They stopped by this morning to make their pitch, weren't too happy with my response." "The Crimson Cobras?" Sarah's face paled. "Dad, they're dangerous. They destroyed Tom's store. They've been terrorizing businesses all through the county." Iron Mom laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Dangerous? Mom, your father faced down an entire NVA battalion with nothing but a K-bar knife and sheer determination. These wannabe tough guys, they're about to learn what real dangerous looks like." The radio on Iron Mom's vest crackled. "Colonel, we've got incoming. Looks like our friends couldn't wait until tonight. Count 12 bikes, moving fast." "Right on schedule," Iron Mom smiled. "Frank, you got somewhere safe for your daughter?" "I'm not leaving," Sarah protested. "This is my father's stand. Our stand." Frank looked at his daughter, seeing the same determination that her mother had shown all those years ago. "She stays," he told Iron Mom. "Morrisons don't run." The rumble of approaching motorcycles grew louder. Iron Mom spoke quietly into her radio, then turned to Frank. "Main force is 15 minutes out? Think we can keep them talking that long?" "Won't need to," Frank replied, reaching under the counter again. This time he pulled out an old photograph, worn at the edges but carefully preserved. "Sometimes the best weapon isn't a gun, it's the truth." The Crimson Cobras roared into the parking area, their bikes forming a loose semicircle around the stand. Viper dismounted first, his face twisted with anger when he spotted the three veteran riders. "Brought some friends, old man," he sneered. "Won't help. This is still our territory." "Territory?" Iron Mom stepped forward, her voice carrying across the parking lot. "Son, the only territory here was paid for by the blood of better men than you'll ever be." Viper's hand moved toward his vest, but Iron Mom's voice stopped him cold. "I wouldn't. Two of the finest snipers I ever commanded are watching you right now. Desert Storm taught them patience. Afghanistan taught them precision." "You're bluffing," Viper snarled, but his hand moved away from his vest. Frank picked up the photograph from the counter. "Before we continue this discussion, I think you should look at something, Robert." Viper's face went white. "How do you know that name?" "Because," Frank held out the photograph, "I served with your father in Khe Sanh, James Wilson. Best radio operator in the whole damn corps. Saved my life 3 times before a mortar got him. His last words were about you. Asked me to make sure his son grew up understanding what real strength looks like." The parking lot went completely silent. Viper, Robert stared at the photograph, his hands shaking as he recognized his father's young face among the Marines. "You're lying," he whispered, but there was no conviction in his voice. "Your father had a silver lighter," Frank continued, "engraved with your birth date. He showed it to everyone in the unit. Said it gave him strength knowing he had a son to go home to." Robert reached into his vest with trembling hands, pulling out a tarnished silver lighter. The date matched exactly. "How did you?" His voice cracked. "How did he die?" "Protecting our unit's evacuation. He stayed on that radio until the end, making sure everyone got out. Real strength, Robert, not this act you've been putting on." The sound of motorcycles filled the air again, but this time it was different. Dozens of bikes appeared from both directions, their riders wearing vests covered in military patches and campaign ribbons. The Veterans Motorcycle Association had arrived in force. But looking at Robert's face, Frank knew the real battle was already won. Sometimes the strongest weapon against hate isn't force. It's the truth about who we really are and who we're meant to be. Robert Wilson, known to his gang as Viper, stood frozen, the silver lighter trembling in his hands as more veterans' motorcycles rolled into the parking area. The contrast was striking. On one side, the Crimson Cobras, their tough guy facades cracking. On the other, real warriors who had nothing to prove. "Your father carried that lighter through 3 tours," Frank continued, his voice gentle but firm. "When things got rough, he'd look at that date and tell us stories about his little boy back home. about how he wanted you to grow up understanding what honor really means. Mac's massive Harley pulled up to the front of the group. The VMA founder dismounted, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile as he approached Frank. They embraced like brothers, then Mac turned to face Robert. "Your dad was the reason I made it home," Mac said. "When I was pinned down, radio destroyed, Jimmy, your father, ran through enemy fire to get to me. Dragged me back while calling in air support. Never met a braver man." Robert's gang members shifted uncomfortably, looking between their leader and the growing circle of veterans. One of them, a younger rider with a snake tattoo on his neck, nervously revved his engine. "Shut it off, kid," Iron Mom commanded. "Show some respect. You're standing on hallowed ground now." Frank walked around his counter, the photograph still in his hand. "Your father died protecting others, Robert. These men here, Mac, me, dozens more, we're alive because of him. Is this how you honor his sacrifice? By terrorizing small businesses? By threatening old veterans?" "I didn't know," Robert whispered. His tough guy persona had completely crumbled, leaving behind what Frank saw was really just a lost son. "After Mom died, I found the lighter in her things. Never knew the story behind it." "Your mother was a strong woman," Frank nodded. "Mary Wilson. She used to write to the whole unit, send us cookies, called us her other sons." Tears began streaming down Robert's face. The remaining facade of Viper washed away with them. His gang members looked increasingly uncertain, their formations breaking down as more veterans' bikes arrived. Iron Mom stepped forward, her voice carrying across the parking lot. "Today's not about revenge, boys. It's about remembrance and respect, about understanding the difference between acting tough and being strong." The young biker with the snake tattoo suddenly cut his engine. "I'm out, boss," he announced. "My old man was a Marine. He'd kick my ass if he knew what we've been doing." He looked at the gathered veterans. "I'm sorry, all of you. This isn't what I signed up for." One by one, other Cobra members began backing away, their manufactured toughness melting under the gaze of real warriors. But Frank kept his eyes on Robert, who was still staring at the photograph of his father. "He smiled just like you," Frank said softly. "Same laugh, too. Every time he got a letter from your mom with news about you, his whole face would light up. Proud father, prouder American." Mac moved closer, his voice gentle. "We've got a chapter house down in River Creek. Veterans meet there twice a week, share stories, help each other out. Your father's picture is on our wall of heroes. Maybe it's time you came to hear some stories about him. Learn who he really was." Sarah, who had been watching silently, emerged from behind the counter with a fresh cup of coffee. She held it out to Robert. "On the house," she said. "Dad always says coffee tastes better when shared with family." Robert took the cup with shaking hands. "The hardware store," he said suddenly. "Tom's place. We trashed it. We need to make that right." "Yes, you do," Iron Mom agreed. "But that's a good start. Recognizing our mistakes, fixing what we've broken, that's real strength." The young biker who had spoken up earlier stepped forward. "I'm good with tools. Used to work construction before all this. I could help rebuild." Mac smiled. "VMA's got a community service program, helps veterans and their families. Think Tom could use some volunteers." More Cobra members began nodding, the tough guy act replaced by something more genuine. Shame, but also hope. The transformation was happening right before their eyes. "Your father believed in second chances," Frank told Robert. "Said everyone deserves one good shot at redemption. Question is, what are you going to do with yours?" Robert finally looked up from the photograph, his eyes clear for the first time. Can you tell me more about him? About what he was really like?" "Better than that," Frank replied. "See all these men and women here? Each one has a story about James Wilson. About his courage, his loyalty, his love for his family. Pull up a chair, son. Coffee's hot and stories are free." The tension in the parking lot had completely transformed. Where there had been threat and intimidation, now there was something different. Understanding, respect, maybe even the beginnings of healing. Iron Mom began organizing the veterans, sending some to check on other businesses the Cobras had terrorized, others to start planning the hardware store's restoration. The remaining Cobra members, stripped of their false bravado, found themselves surrounded by men and women who had faced real battles and emerged stronger for it. "Your father once told me," Frank said as Robert sat down at the counter, still clutching the silver lighter. That true strength isn't about making others fear you. It's about being someone others can count on. About standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Sarah brought out more coffee and fresh cinnamon rolls. The veterans gathered around, some sitting on their bikes, others standing in small groups, all ready to share stories of a fallen brother with his lost son. The morning sun had fully burned away the mountain mist now, revealing a scene no one could have predicted just hours earlier. Where violence had threatened to erupt, reconciliation was taking root instead. The coffee stand, as it had for 15 years, continued serving as a gathering place for the community. Only now, that community was growing in unexpected ways. And as Frank watched Robert lean forward to hear Mac's first story about James Wilson, he smiled, knowing that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating an enemy, but from healing a broken heart. As the morning stretched into afternoon, more veterans arrived at Frank's coffee stand. Each one had a story about James Wilson, and Robert sat there absorbing every word, occasionally wiping tears from his eyes. The silver lighter never left his hand. "Your dad had this way about him," a veteran named Pete was saying. "Even in the worst situations, he'd crack a joke, keep our spirits up. Remember that time in the monsoon, Frank, when he rigged that tarp into a water collection system?" Frank nodded, pouring more coffee. Fed the whole unit for 3 days with that rainwater. Always thinking of others, Jimmy was. The young Cobra member with the snake tattoo who had introduced himself as Danny spoke up hesitantly. "Mr. Morrison, about Tom's hardware store. I was the one who broke his windows. I want to fix it, not just because I have to, but because I need to." Iron Mom, who had been coordinating with other veterans on her radio, turned to Danny. "What's your background, son, besides vandalism?" Danny flushed red. 4 years construction, ma'am, specializing in storefront renovation, actually. The irony is not lost on me. Good skills, she nodded. We could use that. Tom's place needs more than just window repair. VMA is organizing a complete renovation. Want to lead that project? Danny's eyes widened. Me, but I'm not. I mean, I'm one of the ones who... Redemption isn't just about saying sorry, Mac interrupted. It's about actions, using your skills to build instead of destroy. That's real strength. Robert looked up from another photograph Frank had shared. The whole gang will help. It's not negotiable, he added, looking at his remaining members. None disagreed. Sarah, who had been making calls of her own, hung up her phone with a smile. Just talk to Tom. He's willing to give you boys a chance to make it right. Says if you're serious about changing, he might even have some job openings. That's more than we deserve, Robert said quietly. Deserve got nothing to do with it, Frank replied. Your father taught me that. After I got hit bad in '69, felt sorry for myself, thought I deserved to die out there. Jimmy sat with me all night talking about forgiveness, about how life gives us chances to rebuild, not because we deserve them, but because that's how we grow. A new motorcycle pulled into the parking lot. Officer Rodriguez from the county sheriff's department. The Cobra members tensed, but Iron Mom held up a hand. It's okay, he's one of us. Desert Storm, 3rd Infantry. Rodriguez dismounted, removing his helmet to reveal graying hair and a weathered face. He surveyed the scene. Veterans mingling with former gang members, coffee being shared, stories being told. Got some complaints about a disturbance up here, he said, approaching Frank's counter. Though from what I'm seeing, looks more like a reunion. More like a reconciliation, Frank answered, sliding a cup of coffee toward the officer. Remember James Wilson? Rodriguez's face softened. Jimmy? From Kaysan? Who could forget? He turned to Robert, recognition dawning. You're his boy, aren't you? Got his look about you. Robert nodded, unable to speak. We're working on making things right, Iron Mom explained to Rodriguez. Starting with Tom's hardware store. These boys are trading in their Cobra patches for tool belts. Rodriguez considered this, sipping his coffee. Tom's a good man, former army himself. If he's willing to give you a chance, I'll back his play. He turned to Robert, but one step out of line. No, sir, Robert said firmly. We're done with all that. I want to honor my father's memory. Do something he'd be proud of. Then let's start with the paperwork, Rodriguez replied, pulling out a notepad. I'll need statements about all the businesses you've harassed. Can't move forward without facing up to what's behind us." For the next hour, Robert and his remaining gang members detailed their activities. Some Cobras had already fled when the veterans arrived, but those who stayed held nothing back. Rodriguez took their statements, his face grim, but his eyes understanding. Meanwhile, Iron Mom had organized the veterans into teams. Some would help with Tom's store renovation. Others would reach out to other businesses the Cobras had terrorized. Mac was already planning a community fundraiser to help cover costs. "Your father believed in community," Frank told Robert as the young man finished his statement. Said it was like a motorcycle, lots of parts working together, each one important, each one needed to keep things running smooth. Danny, who had been sketching renovation plans with some of the veterans, looked up. "We could do that too, couldn't we? Use our bikes for something good? I've heard about motorcycle clubs doing charity runs, helping with parades, that kind of thing." Iron Mom smiled. "Now you're thinking. VMA's got a toy run coming up next month, collecting Christmas presents for veterans' families in need. Could use some extra bikes." The transformation in the parking lot was remarkable. Where hours ago there had been tension and threat of violence, now there was purpose and planning. The Crimson Cobras were dying, but something new was being born in their place. Sarah brought out sandwiches she'd called the local deli to deliver lunch for everyone. As food was passed around, more stories flowed. Veterans shared not just tales of James Wilson's bravery, but their own struggles after coming home, how they'd found purpose in helping others. "Your dad would have loved this," Frank told Robert quietly. Seeing people come together, seeing hurt turn to healing, that's what he fought for. Robert looked at the silver lighter, then at the gathered crowd. Former enemies were breaking bread together, planning ways to rebuild what had been broken. Not just buildings, but trust, respect, community. "I've been angry for so long," he admitted. "After Mom died, finding this lighter, I thought being tough meant making others afraid. But listening to these stories, understanding who my father really was." Frank placed a hand on Robert's shoulder. "Strength comes in many forms. Your father's was in his heart. His ability to bring people together, to lift them up instead of tearing them down. That strength, it's in you too. Just been waiting to find its way out." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as Officer Rodriguez finished taking statements. He closed his notepad and looked at Robert with a mix of sternness and compassion. "Given the circumstances and Tom's willingness to work this out privately, I think we can handle this without formal charges. But," he paused, making eye contact with each former Cobra member, "this is your one chance. Make it count." "We will, sir," Robert replied, his voice firm, "starting today." Mac had spread out a large map on one of the picnic tables Frank kept outside his stand. Veterans and former Cobras huddled around it, marking locations of businesses they needed to visit, planning their community restoration efforts. "Priority is Tom's hardware store," Iron Mom was saying, circling the location. "Danny, you said you can lead that renovation?" Danny nodded eagerly. "Yes, ma'am. I've been sketching some ideas." He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper with detailed drawings. "The storefront needs complete rebuilding, but we can make it better than before. Maybe add a covered area for loading during bad weather." "Good thinking," Mac approved. "Tom's not as young as he used to be. Loading area would help him a lot." Sarah, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly spoke up. "Dad, remember that storage shed behind the stand? The one full of your old building supplies?" Frank smiled, already thinking about that. "Sweetheart, those materials could get Tom's renovation started right away." Iron Mom turned to the remaining Cobra members. "How many of you have useful skills besides intimidation?" One by one, they spoke up. Besides Danny's construction experience, they had a plumber, 2 former mechanics, and even an electrician, skills they'd abandoned for the false power of gang life. "Perfect," Iron Mom nodded. "We're not just going to fix what you broke, we're going to make it better." Robert, who had been studying the map intently, pointed to several locations. "These businesses here, we didn't damage them, but we scared them, threatened them. We need to make that right too." "Admitting wrong is the first step," Frank said. "Making it right is the journey." A veteran named Mike, who'd been coordinating with other VMA chapters on his phone, joined the group. "Got good news. Chapters from 3 states are sending supplies, building materials, tools, everything we need. They'll be here by morning." "That's great," Danny said, then hesitated. "But where do we store everything? The hardware store is not secure yet." Frank exchanged looks with Sarah, who nodded. "The warehouse behind my house," she offered. "It's empty since Tom moved his overflow stock. It's perfect for a command center." "Command center," Robert repeated softly, running his thumb over his father's lighter. Dad would have liked that term. "Speaking of terms," Iron Mom interjected, "you boys need a new name. Can't keep calling yourselves the Crimson Cobras if you're going to be working with the VMA." The former gang members looked at each other uncertainly. It was Danny who spoke first. "What about Wilson's Warriors? To honor Robert's dad and maybe all veterans?" The suggestion hung in the air for a moment. Robert's eyes welled up with tears again, but this time he didn't try to hide them. If that's okay," Danny added quickly. "I mean, we'd have to earn it." Mac clapped Danny on the shoulder. "Son, wanting to earn it is exactly why you deserve to use it." Frank watched the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. The coffee stand had always been more than just a business. It was a gathering place, a healing place. Today proved that more than ever. Officer Rodriguez, who had been making calls of his own, rejoined the group. "Just talked to the mayor. City council's on board with the renovation project. They're even talking about making it a community-wide effort. Seems people are tired of living in fear." "Fear versus respect," Frank mused. "Your father used to talk about that," Robert said. "Fear divides, but respect unites." Sarah had been working on something behind the counter. She emerged with a large thermos and several cups. "Dad's special blend," she announced. "He only makes it for special occasions." As she poured the coffee, the gentle aroma seemed to lift everyone's spirits even higher. The veterans and former gang members continued planning, but now there was something else in the air. Hope, purpose, and the sense that something extraordinary was happening. "Mr. Morrison?" Danny approached Frank hesitantly. "Think you could teach us about coffee? I mean, maybe we could learn to run stands of our own someday. Give other veterans places to gather." Frank studied the young man thoughtfully. Where there had been anger and false bravado this morning, he now saw a genuine desire to change. "Told your father the same thing once," he said to Robert. "Coffee is not just about beans and water. It's about creating space for community, for healing." Iron Mom was already making notes. Could be part of the VMA's Veteran Support Program, a network of coffee stands run by people who understand service and sacrifice. The planning continued as the afternoon wore on. What had started as a confrontation was transforming into something none of them could have predicted. The veterans shared more stories about James Wilson and their own experiences, while the former Cobras listened with growing respect and understanding. "You know what this reminds me of?" Mac said quietly to Frank. "That night in Quezon, when Jimmy got the whole unit together after we lost Thompson and Martinez. Remember what he said?" Frank nodded. "Tonight, we're not Marines or sailors or airmen," he quoted. "Tonight, we're just brothers holding each other up." Robert overheard and added softly, "That's what we're doing here, isn't it? Holding each other up." "That's exactly what we're doing, son," Frank replied. "And that's exactly what your father would have wanted." The sun was beginning to set behind the mountains, but no one seemed eager to leave. There was still much to plan, more stories to share, and healing to be done. The coffee stand, as it had for 15 years, continued serving as a beacon of hope and community. And as Frank watched around at the unlikely gathering, veterans and former gang members, law enforcement and civilians, all united in purpose, he knew that this was just the beginning of something remarkable. As twilight settled over the mountains, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky, Frank's coffee stand buzzed with unprecedented activity. Iron Mom had transformed the parking area into an impromptu command center, with veterans and former Cobra members gathered around makeshift planning stations. "Danny, take me through the hardware store renovation timeline again," she requested, spreading out his sketches on the hood of her motorcycle. "Yes, ma'am. First phase is securing the building, new windows, doors, and security system. That's day 1 and 2. Then we move to structural repairs, which should take about a week. After that, interior renovation and restocking. Figure 3 weeks total if we work steady. Make it 2, Robert interjected. We owe Tom that much. We can work in shifts around the clock if necessary. Frank, who had been listening while preparing a fresh pot of coffee, spoke up. Tom's arthritis has been getting worse. Might want to consider some accessibility modifications while you're at it. Danny's face lit up. Actually, I had an idea about that. He sketched quickly on a fresh paper. We could install an automated inventory system. Motion sensors that track stock levels, connected to a tablet. Tom wouldn't have to climb ladders to check inventory anymore. Sarah, who had been making calls to local suppliers, looked impressed. Where'd you learn about systems like that? Danny's face reddened. I was studying engineering before I fell in with the wrong crowd. Never finished my degree. Never too late to finish, Mac commented. VMA's got an education support program for veterans and their families. Might be able to help with that. Officer Rodriguez, who had stayed to help coordinate the community response, added, County's got some programs too. Job training, education grants for people looking to turn their lives around. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of several cars. Local business owners, hearing about what was happening at Frank's stand, had begun showing up. Among them was Mrs. Chen from the Chinese restaurant down the road. Mr. Morrison, she called out, carrying large containers. I bring food. Cannot plan on empty stomach. The aroma of her famous dumplings filled the air, mixing with the coffee scent in a surprisingly pleasant way. More community members arrived, bringing dishes, drinks, and offers of help. Robert watched the growing crowd with amazement. All these people, after what we did to them. Community is stronger than fear, son, Frank said. Your father understood that, why he fought so hard to protect it. Mrs. Chen approached Robert directly, her small frame somehow commanding. You boys scared my granddaughter last week, made her cry. Robert hung his head in shame. Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry. You want to make right? She interrupted. My restaurant needs new delivery drivers. Good pay, flexible hours, better than scaring children, yes? Before Robert could respond, Danny stepped forward. Ma'am, we'd be honored. But maybe we could do more. I noticed your restaurant's wheelchair ramp needs repair. We could fix that, make it safer for your elderly customers. Mrs. Chen's stern expression softened slightly. You know how to build? Yes, ma'am. And we want to help. All of us. Iron Mom, who had been watching the exchange, turned to Mac. Think we just found our second project after Tom's store. The planning continued as more community members arrived. The parking lot became a hub of activity, with different groups forming to address various needs. The former Cobras, stripped of their tough guy facades, revealed themselves to be skilled workers eager to make amends. Sarah had started a list on a large whiteboard, community restoration projects. Below it she wrote, 1. Tom's hardware store renovation. 2. Mrs. Chen's restaurant repairs. 3. Community center improvements. 4. Veterans support network. We'll need coordination, Iron Mom mused. Can't have everyone working on everything at once. I can help with that, offered a quiet voice. It was Lisa, Robert's younger sister, who had arrived after hearing what was happening. I'm a project manager at the tech firm in River Creek. Been doing this kind of coordination for years. Robert stared at his sister, whom he hadn't spoken to in months. Lisa, She cut him off with a hug. Mom would be proud of you, finally finding your way. Dad, too. Frank watched the siblings' reunion while serving coffee to the growing crowd. The stand had become more than just a meeting place. It was becoming the heart of a community revival. A young girl tugged at his sleeve. It was Mrs. Chen's granddaughter, Jenny. Mr. Morrison? Can I help serve coffee? Mama says it's good to help people who help others. Frank smiled, remembering another young girl who used to help at his stand. Your mom's right. Here, let me show you how to pour it just right. Coffee's got to be served with love, you see? Makes it taste better. As Jenny carefully learned to handle the coffee pot, more plans were being made around them. The VMA veterans were organizing work crews, local businesses were pledging support, and the former Cobras were throwing themselves into the planning with the same energy they had once used to intimidate. Tom himself arrived as night was falling, his old truck rattling into the parking lot. The former Cobras tensed, but the hardware store owner just walked straight up to Robert. Heard you boys want to make things right. he said gruffly. Yes, sir. More than anything. Tom nodded slowly. Well, I got about 30 years of hardware store experience. Figure if you're going to rebuild my shop, might as well learn how to run it properly too. Robert's eyes widened. Sir? I'm getting old, Tom instructed. Do you have spare glass sheets in storage? Tom, who had joined them with a mix of cautious optimism, nodded. Yeah, but they're old stock. Might need some reinforcement. We'll make it work, Danny assured him, and we'll redo the storefront sign, something brighter, more welcoming. Meanwhile, back at the coffee stand, Robert rehearsed his speech for the city council meeting with Iron Mom and Frank. His nerves were palpable, but the veteran's steady encouragement helped calm him. Remember, Iron Mom said, her tone firm but supportive, this isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about showing the council what this community can achieve when people come together. Speak from the heart. Robert nodded, gripping the lighter in his pocket for reassurance. I just want to do right by my dad, by all of you. Then you've already won half the battle, Frank said, patting him on the shoulder. By mid-morning, the teams began converging at the city council building where the meeting was set to take place. The small chamber was packed with local residents, business owners, and council members, all curious to hear the proposals. Robert stood at the front of the room, flanked by Iron Mom, Lisa, and Tom. The moment was surreal for him. Once the leader of a gang that had terrorized this very community, now standing before its leaders to make amends. Good morning, Robert began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. My name is Robert Wilson. Some of you might know me as Viper, the leader of the Crimson Cobras. I'm not proud of the things I've done, and I won't make excuses, but I'm here today because I want to make things right. The room fell silent as Robert continued, outlining the plans for restoring Tom's hardware store, repairing Mrs. Chen's restaurant, and expanding the community center. He spoke about the veterans' involvement, the support from local businesses, and the renewed sense of purpose driving the efforts. We're not asking for money, Robert concluded. We're asking for trust. Let us show you that people can change, that communities can heal, and together we can make this town stronger than it's ever been. The council members exchanged glances, their skepticism softening in the face of Robert's sincerity. When Tom stood to vouch for the plans and shared his optimism for the town's future, the room erupted in applause. As they left the meeting, Robert felt a wave of relief and pride. I think they'll approve it, he said to Iron Mom. They'd be fools not to, she replied with a rare smile. Now, let's get back to work. The rest of the day was spent in action. At Mrs. Chen's restaurant, Danny led a crew in repairing the wheelchair ramp and assessing the kitchen's needs. The sight of former Cobras working alongside veterans and community members brought smiles to the faces of passers-by. At the coffee stand, Frank served coffee to anyone who stopped by, sharing stories of the town's transformation. Word was spreading fast, and more people arrived to offer help, bringing supplies, tools, and even baked goods to fuel the workers. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the mountains, the progress was undeniable. Tom's hardware store had new windows and a fresh coat of primer. Mrs. Chen's ramp was nearly complete, and plans for the community center were well underway. For the first time in years, the town felt alive with hope and possibility, and at the center of it all was Frank's coffee stand, a humble but powerful reminder of what could be achieved when people came together. The next morning, the parking lot at Frank's coffee stand was already bustling with activity by sunrise. Trucks loaded with building materials began arriving, courtesy of the Veterans Motorcycle Association and local suppliers who had stepped up to support the cause. The air buzzed with the sounds of hammers, saws, and eager voices. Robert, now fully immersed in his role, stood alongside Danny at Tom's hardware store, reviewing the updated blueprints. The team had decided to go beyond basic repairs, incorporating ideas for a modern, community-focused redesign. This new layout will make it easier for customers to find what they need, Danny explained, pointing to a sketch. We'll add wider aisles for accessibility, and the outdoor loading area is already coming together. Robert nodded, and we're keeping the original sign's frame. Tom said his dad built it by hand. We'll just update the lettering. Tom, standing nearby, smiled fondly. My old man would have loved this. He always said a hardware store should feel like home, practical but welcoming. As the crew got to work, Lisa arrived, her organizational skills proving invaluable. She moved between workstations, ensuring that everyone knew their roles and that the timeline was on track. "Tom," Robert asked, "how's the stock list coming?" Tom shrugged. "Been looking for someone to train up. Someone who understands hard work and making things right. Interested?" The transformation on Robert's face was remarkable. Where there had been shame, now there was hope. Where there had been anger, now there was purpose. Frank raised his voice slightly. "Coffee's hot, folks, and if I remember correctly, Tom here tells the best stories about the old days of this town. Think we could all learn something about building community from those stories." As people gathered for coffee and conversation, the night air filled with plans, promises, and possibility. The mountains watched silently as something remarkable continued to unfold at a simple coffee stand on a curved mountain road. Night had fully settled over the mountains, but Frank's coffee stand glowed like a beacon in the darkness. Someone had strung up work lights around the parking area, and the atmosphere had transformed from a planning session into something more like a community festival. Tom sat at the counter, sharing his vision for the hardware store's future with Robert and Danny. "Been thinking about adding a tool rental service," he said. "A lot of folks around here can't afford to buy expensive equipment they only need once or twice." "We could create a workshop space too," Danny suggested, sketching rapidly. "Teach people basic home repairs, maybe partner with the high school for vocational training." Lisa, Robert's sister, was already inputting their ideas into her laptop. "The community center could help coordinate all this," she said. "Create a network of services, skills training, job opportunities." Iron Mom, overhearing the conversation, pulled up a chair. "VMA's got members with every skill imaginable, could set up regular training sessions, mentor programs. Changing lives through hardware," Tom mused. "Never thought of my store that way before." Frank refilled their coffee cups, adding, "Jimmy always said tools were just a way to build bridges between people. Guess he meant that literally and figuratively." The mention of his father made Robert pause. He pulled out the silver lighter again, studying it in the artificial light. "Dad used to fix things around the house all the time. Never called a repairman, said there was pride in fixing things yourself." "Pride in fixing things," Frank repeated softly. "That's what we're doing here, isn't it? Fixing more than just buildings." Mrs. Chen, who had been listening quietly while distributing more dumplings, spoke up. "My restaurant needs fixing too. Not just ramp, kitchen equipment old, dining room needs update, but no money for big changes." Danny and Robert exchanged looks. "Ma'am," Danny said, "what if we helped you modernize? Make your kitchen more efficient, update the dining room? We could do the work in stages, keep disruption to a minimum. And I know some restaurant suppliers," Sarah added, "could probably get good deals on equipment through them." Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. "But cost? We'll figure it out," Iron Mom assured her. "Community fundraising, volunteer labor, material donations. When people work together, anything's possible." Officer Rodriguez, who had been making more calls, rejoined the group. "Just got off the phone with the mayor again. City Council's calling an emergency session tomorrow morning. They want to hear your proposals for community renovation." "All of them?" Robert asked nervously. "All of you," Rodriguez corrected. "They want to hear from everyone involved. The veterans, the former Cobras, the business owners. They're talking about creating a community restoration initiative." Frank watched as the news energized the crowd even further. Plans that had started as simple repairs were evolving into something much bigger, a complete community transformation. Jenny, Mrs. Chen's granddaughter, had fallen asleep in one of the picnic chairs, clutching an empty coffee cup she'd been practicing with. Her mother covered her with a jacket, smiling at Frank. "She wants to learn making coffee now," she said. "Says she wants to be just like you, helping people come together." The night grew deeper, but no one seemed eager to leave. The work lights cast long shadows as people moved between planning groups, sharing ideas, making connections. The former Cobras, who hours ago had been the community's terror, were now deeply engaged in planning its revival. Lisa had created a detailed spreadsheet on her laptop, projecting timelines and resource needs. "If we coordinate properly," She explained, "We can have the first phase completed within a month. Tom's store, Mrs. Chen's restaurant, and the basic community center set up. What about the other businesses we harmed?" One of the former Cobras asked hesitantly. "Phase 2, Lisa replied without hesitation. "We'll assess each situation, prioritize based on need and available resources. No one gets left behind." Mac, who had been coordinating with other VMA chapters, had more good news. Got chapters in 5 states now wanting to help. They're organizing supply runs, volunteer teams. This is becoming something bigger than we imagined. "That's how change happens," Frank observed, wiping down his counter out of habit. "Starts with one small step, then spreads like ripples in a pond." Robert stood up suddenly, his face serious. "Mr. Morrison, could I say something to everyone?" Frank nodded, and Iron Mom quickly got people's attention. The parking lot fell silent as Robert cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about my father all day," he began, his voice shaky but growing stronger. "Hearing your stories about him, about who he really was. I spent years trying to be strong in all the wrong ways, dishonoring everything he stood for. But today," he paused, looking around at the gathered faces, "today I finally understand what real strength is. It's not about fear or power. It's about bringing people together, about building instead of destroying." He held up the silver lighter, its surface catching the work lights. "This was his legacy to me, but I never understood what it meant until now. Each time he looked at it, he was reminded of home, of family, of what he was fighting for. Today, we're all fighting for something too. Not with weapons, but with tools and skills and hope." The silence that followed was profound. Then Mrs. Chen stood up. "You boys scared me before, made me afraid in my own restaurant. But now," she smiled, "now you give me hope. Hope for my business, for my granddaughter's future, for community." One by one, others stood to speak. Business owners sharing their hopes, veterans offering support, former gang members pledging to make things right. The night air filled with voices of people who had been divided by fear, now united in purpose. Frank watched it all from behind his counter, serving coffee and witnessing the transformation. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest gestures. A cup of coffee, a story shared, a hand extended in forgiveness. The mountains stood silent witness as, at a humble coffee stand on a curved road, a community began to heal and rebuild itself, one promise at a time. The dawn broke over the mountains, casting a golden glow across the parking lot of Frank's coffee stand. Despite the late night of planning, a few key figures had returned early, invigorated by the momentum of their newfound mission. Frank had already started brewing his special blend, filling the crisp morning air with the familiar aroma that felt like home. Danny and Robert arrived together, carrying rolled-up blueprints and toolkits. Robert looked more determined than ever, a weight seemingly lifted from his shoulders as he stepped out of his truck and surveyed the area. "Morning, Mr. Morrison." Danny greeted with a smile. "We're ready to get started." Frank chuckled, pouring 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Morning, boys. You're early, but that's a good thing. Plenty to do before the city council meeting." Robert took a deep breath, his father's lighter tucked safely into his pocket. "I've been thinking, Mr. Morrison, it's not just about fixing buildings. It's about fixing the trust we broke. We need to go door to door and apologize to every person we've wronged." Frank nodded approvingly. "A good first step, son. Apologies go a long way, but actions seal the deal. Don't just say the words, show them what you're doing to make it right." Before they could dive deeper into the discussion, Lisa pulled into the lot, laptop bag slung over her shoulder and a focused expression on her face. "Morning, gentlemen," she said briskly. "I've mapped out our timeline for the day. We need to finalize the pitch for the city council, check on Tom's hardware store repairs, and coordinate with the veterans arriving from out of town. And don't forget Mrs. Chen's ramp," Danny added. "We promised her we'd start that today." Lisa tapped on her tablet. "Already factored in, but we'll need to split into teams to stay on track." Iron Mom arrived next, leading a small group of veterans on motorcycles. They parked in formation, their presence commanding respect and quiet admiration. "All right, folks," she announced, dismounting with practiced ease. "Let's get to work. Danny, you're leading the hardware store team. Robert, you're with me for the city council pitch. Lisa, you've got logistics. Let's move." The morning unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. At Tom's hardware store, Danny and his team assessed the damage from the Cobra's earlier rampage. Broken windows, graffiti-covered walls, and a shattered door frame bore testimony to the destruction. But Danny's determination shone as he rallied the crew. "We'll start with the windows. Remember, we need to have the front of the store presentable by this weekend for the ribbon cutting. The council wants to use it as the kickoff for the town's restoration project." Meanwhile, at Mrs. Chen's restaurant, a similar scene unfolded. A team of veterans and former Cobras worked together to update the kitchen equipment and repaint the dining area. Mrs. Chen bustled around, overseeing the work and occasionally offering snacks to the workers. "I can't believe how quickly this is coming together," Mrs. Chen marveled, watching as Danny carefully installed a new stove. Danny grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. "We've got a lot to make up for, ma'am, and it feels good to build something instead of tearing it down." Frank made his rounds to each site, delivering coffee and words of encouragement at every stop. He could see the transformation taking place, not just in the buildings, but in the people. The former Cobras, once hardened and closed off, now worked with purpose and camaraderie, their rough edges softening as they became part of something bigger than themselves. Back at the coffee stand, Sarah had set up a donation station, collecting funds and supplies from townspeople who wanted to contribute. She also organized a sign-up sheet for volunteers, and by midday, it was filled with names. "Dad," Sarah said as Frank poured her a fresh cup of coffee, "this is turning into something huge. People are really coming together." Frank smiled, the pride evident in his eyes. "It's amazing what can happen when folks realize they're stronger together. Your mom always said this town has good bones, just needed a little love to bring it back to life." As the day wore on, progress continued at an impressive pace. By late afternoon, the new wheelchair ramp at Mrs. Chen's restaurant was completed, and the first coat of paint was drying on Tom's hardware store. The veterans and former Cobras had formed an efficient team, their combined skills proving invaluable. Iron Mom, overseeing the various projects, called for a break. "All right, everyone, gather up. Let's take a moment to regroup." The workers convened at the coffee stand, where Frank and Sarah had set up tables with sandwiches, cookies, and of course, coffee. The atmosphere was light-hearted, filled with laughter and camaraderie. "I never thought I'd be sitting here with all of you," Robert admitted, looking around at the group. "A year ago, I was a completely different person, angry, lost, but now it feels like I've finally found where I belong." "Belonging is earned," Iron Mom said, her tone softer than usual. "And you've taken big steps toward earning it. Your dad would be proud." The mention of his father brought a bittersweet smile to Robert's face. He held up the silver lighter. "I carry this with me every day now. It reminds me of who he was and who I want to be." After the break, the teams returned to work, energized and determined to meet their goals. The veterans continued to share their expertise, guiding the younger workers and teaching them valuable skills. The former Cobras, in turn, worked harder than ever, eager to prove themselves and repay the trust that had been placed in them. By evening, the hardware store's exterior was nearly complete. Freshly painted walls gleamed in the golden light, and a new sign had been hung above the entrance. Inside, shelves were being restocked, and the new layout was taking shape. Mrs. Chen's restaurant was also nearing its transformation. The kitchen renovations were finished, and the dining area was freshly painted with cheerful colors. Mrs. Chen had even added a small chalkboard wall for kids to draw on, an idea suggested by one of the veterans. As the sun dipped below the mountains, the workers gathered once again at Frank's coffee stand to reflect on the day's accomplishments. There was still much to do, but the progress was undeniable. Frank raised a cup of coffee. A toast to hard work, to second chances, and to this town. We've still got a long road ahead, but I've never been more proud of all of you. The group raised their cups in unison, the sound of their cheers echoing across the mountains. The bonds forged during those long days of work were growing stronger, creating a foundation for a brighter future. And as the stars filled the night sky, Frank looked around at the faces gathered around him. Veterans, former gang members, townspeople, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. What had started as a simple act of defiance against fear had become something so much greater. The morning of the ribbon-cutting ceremony arrived with clear skies and a renewed energy in the town. The hardware store gleamed with its fresh coat of paint, the newly designed sign reading Wilson's Tools and Supply as a tribute to Robert's father. Red, white, and blue ribbons framed the entrance, waiting to be cut. Robert paced nervously near the entrance as a growing crowd gathered to witness the moment. Business owners, families, and veterans filled the space, chatting excitedly about the changes sweeping through their community. Even children ran around, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension that had once loomed over the town. Frank arrived with Sarah, carrying a box of freshly baked cookies to share with the crowd. He paused next to Robert, handing him a steaming cup of coffee. "Relax, son," Frank said with a warm smile. "This isn't just about the store. It's about showing everyone what's possible when we come together." Robert took a deep breath, the familiar scent of Frank's coffee calming his nerves. "I just want to do my dad proud." "You already have," Frank replied. "Now, let's make it official." Iron Mom and Lisa took their positions beside Robert, ready to kick off the event. Lisa tapped the microphone set up near the entrance, her voice amplified over the crowd. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her confident tone immediately capturing the audience's attention. "Today, we celebrate not just the reopening of Wilson's Tools and Supply, but the resilience and strength of this community. This project wouldn't have been possible without the dedication of so many people. Veterans, volunteers, and even those seeking second chances." The crowd applauded, their cheers echoing through the mountains. Lisa gestured toward Robert, handing him the microphone. Robert hesitated, his hand tightening around the lighter in his pocket. But as he looked out at the supportive faces before him, he found his voice. "Thank you," he began, his tone steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "This store is more than just a business. It's a symbol of what my father stood for: hard work, community, and doing what's right, even when it's hard. I didn't always understand that, but thanks to all of you, I'm starting to." He paused, glancing at Tom, Danny, and the veterans who had worked tirelessly to make this moment possible. "This isn't just about fixing what was broken. It's about building something better together, and I promise I won't let you down." As the crowd erupted into applause, Iron Mom stepped forward with a ceremonial pair of scissors. She handed them to Robert, who turned to Tom. "Would you do the honors, sir? This store wouldn't exist without you." Tom smiled, his hands steady as he took the scissors. With a decisive snip, the ribbon fell, and the crowd cheered. Inside the store was a marvel of efficiency and warmth. The wider aisles and updated shelving made it inviting, while the new tool rental section drew excited comments from the gathered residents. Tom beamed as he gave tours, pointing out the thoughtful touches added by Danny and the team. As the day continued, the atmosphere outside turned festive. Mrs. Chen set up a table offering dumplings, while Sarah managed a bake sale to raise funds for future projects. The veterans had organized a small demonstration, showcasing skills like woodworking and welding, drawing curious onlookers. Amid the celebration, Robert noticed a group of former Cobras lingering at the edge of the crowd. Their uncertain expressions betrayed their hesitation, but Robert waved them over. "You're part of this too," he said, his voice firm but welcoming. "We've all got work to do, and it starts with showing up." The men exchanged glances before stepping forward, joining the festivities. One of them, a young man named Hector, approached Mrs. Chen and offered to help serve food. "Thank you," Mrs. Chen said, her smile kind but measured. "It's good to see you boys here helping instead of scaring." Hector nodded, his face earnest. "We're trying, ma'am, really." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the celebration began to wind down. Robert found himself standing near Frank's coffee stand, watching as people laughed, talked, and made plans for the future. "It's amazing, isn't it?" Sarah said, joining him. "Just a few weeks ago, none of this seemed possible." Robert nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "It's like waking up from a bad dream and realizing you've got a second chance." Frank approached, handing each of them a cup of his signature brew. "That's the beauty of community, son. When we stop tearing each other down and start lifting each other up, there's no limit to what we can do." The trio stood in comfortable silence, sipping their coffee as the last rays of sunlight painted the mountains in shades of orange and gold. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of tools at work, veterans and volunteers continuing to make repairs at Mrs. Chen's restaurant, undeterred by the fading light. For Robert, the moment was bittersweet. He thought of his father, of the legacy he had left behind, and of the man he was finally becoming. "We're just getting started," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Frank nodded, his eyes twinkling with pride. "That we are, son. That we are." As the week progressed, the town's transformation gained momentum. The energy sparked by the hardware store's reopening carried over into every corner of the community. Volunteers of all ages joined the efforts, their combined determination turning once daunting projects into achievable goals. At Mrs. Chen's restaurant, the updates were nearing completion. The newly installed kitchen equipment gleamed under bright lights, while the dining area had been transformed into a welcoming space with fresh paint and modern decor. The finishing touch was a mural painted on one of the walls, depicting a vibrant mountain landscape, a collaborative effort by local artists. "Beautiful," Mrs. Chen said softly, running her hand over the smooth surface of a new countertop. "It's better than I ever imagined." Robert stood nearby, helping Hector install a final set of shelves. "It's not just your restaurant, Mrs. Chen," he said. "It's a piece of this town. We're just giving it the love it deserves." Hector, who had been quiet for most of the week, chimed in. "You know, I never thought I'd enjoy this kind of work, but seeing something broken turn into something beautiful, it's satisfying." Mrs. Chen smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You boys are doing good. Your parents would be proud." At the same time, Frank's coffee stand continued to serve as the hub for coordination and camaraderie. Each morning, workers gathered there to map out their tasks, grab a cup of coffee, and share stories of progress. Frank and Sarah had added extra tables to accommodate the growing crowds, and the stand buzzed with a sense of purpose. Lisa had taken on the role of project manager with remarkable efficiency. Armed with her laptop and a seemingly endless supply of sticky notes, she juggled schedules, budgets, and supply lists with ease. "We're ahead of schedule on the community center repairs," she announced during one morning meeting. "The plumbing issue is resolved, and the new flooring should be installed by the end of the week." Danny, who had become the unofficial lead on construction projects, nodded in approval. "Good. That means we can redirect some of the crew to work on the playground next door. It's been an eyesore for years." The playground project quickly became a town favorite. Families brought their children to help paint, hammer, and clean, turning the effort into a joyous activity. Robert found himself working alongside a group of kids, helping them assemble a brightly colored jungle gym. "Mr. Robert?" a little boy asked, tugging at his sleeve. "Were you always good at fixing things?" Robert paused, the question catching him off guard. "Not always," he admitted. "I used to break more than I fixed, but now I'm trying to do better." The boy nodded solemnly. "My dad says everyone can do better if they try." "Your dad's a smart man," Robert replied, ruffling the boy's hair. "He's right." Meanwhile, Iron Mom and Mac were busy coordinating with neighboring towns to bring in additional resources. The Veterans Motorcycle Association had become deeply involved, with chapters from across the region, sending supplies, volunteers, and even financial support. "This isn't just about one town," Iron Mom explained during a strategy session. "It's about showing what's possible when people come together. We're building a blueprint for other communities to follow." Frank listened intently, his face thoughtful. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about expanding the coffee stand, turning it into more of a gathering place, a spot where people can come together, share ideas, and support each other." Sarah beamed. "That's a great idea, Dad. We could add a small stage for events, maybe even host workshops or open mic nights." "It's got potential," Iron Mom agreed, "and it fits with the spirit of everything we're doing here." The idea quickly gained traction, with volunteers offering to help design and build the expansion. Plans were drawn up, and work began almost immediately, with Frank overseeing the process while still serving coffee to a steady stream of customers. As the days went by, the impact of the restoration efforts became increasingly evident. Streets once marked by neglect now felt vibrant and alive, with businesses reopening, children playing, and neighbors reconnecting. The town had become a symbol of resilience, drawing attention from nearby communities and even local news outlets. One afternoon, a news crew arrived at Frank's coffee stand to film a segment about the transformation. The reporter, a young woman with a warm smile, interviewed several key figures, including Robert. "Robert," she began, holding out a microphone, "you were once the leader of the Crimson Cobras, a gang that caused a lot of harm in this town. What inspired this change?" Robert took a moment to collect his thoughts, the weight of the question clear in his expression. "It started with a single conversation," he said, his voice steady. "Frank reminded me of my father, what he stood for, what he believed in. That conversation set me on a path to make amends, not just for the damage I caused, but for the kind of person I'd become." He gestured toward the bustling activity around them. "This isn't just my redemption story, it's the story of an entire community coming together, proving that it's never too late to fix what's broken." The reporter nodded, clearly moved. "And what's next for you, Robert?" He smiled, the lighter in his pocket serving as a comforting presence. "Keep building, keep helping, and maybe one day I'll be the kind of man my father always believed I could be." The segment aired that evening, drawing widespread attention and sparking conversations about similar efforts in other towns. Messages of support flooded in, with offers of help and donations pouring into the town's restoration fund. As the sun set on another day of progress, Frank gathered the core team, Robert, Danny, Lisa, Iron Mom, and Mac, for a quiet moment of reflection at the coffee stand. The group sat around a small fire pit, sipping coffee and sharing stories. "We've come a long way," Mac said, his voice filled with pride. "But this is just the beginning." Frank nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "The real work isn't the repairs or the buildings. It's the connections we're rebuilding, the trust, the respect, the sense of belonging." Robert looked around at the group, his heart full. "And we're not stopping here." The town's transformation culminated with a community celebration, a day that felt like a fresh chapter for everyone involved. Families gathered at the newly refurbished playground, children's laughter echoing through the crisp mountain air. Frank's coffee stand served as the centerpiece, its expanded space now featuring a small stage adorned with twinkling lights. Volunteers bustled about, setting up food stalls, activity stations, and a display of before and after photos that documented the town's revival. The photos told a powerful story. Shattered windows replaced with vibrant storefronts, overgrown lots transformed into gardens, and hardened faces softened by hope and unity. Robert arrived early, helping set up chairs for the main event. As he worked, he caught sight of Mrs. Chen directing her staff at the restaurant's booth. A line had already formed for her famous dumplings, and she looked happier than Robert had ever seen her. Nearby, Tom stood proudly in front of his hardware store, chatting with residents about the new rental program and upcoming DIY workshops. Danny hovered close, holding a clipboard and managing last-minute details with a newfound confidence. Lisa joined Robert, with a cup of coffee in hand and her laptop tucked under her arm. "It's all coming together," she said, her voice tinged with pride. "And the mayor's office just called. They're sending a representative to officially commend the restoration efforts." Robert smiled. "It's more than I ever hoped for. But it's not just about me. This town deserves every bit of this." As the celebration kicked off, Frank took the stage to deliver the opening remarks. Dressed in his usual flannel shirt and with his trademark warm smile, he looked every bit the cornerstone of the community he had always been. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and full of emotion, "what you see here today is the result of something truly special. Not just hard work or determination, but the belief that no matter how broken something seems, it can always be rebuilt." He paused, glancing at Robert, Danny, and the veterans scattered through the crowd. This started as a fight against fear, but it became so much more. It became a reminder of what we're capable of when we come together, when we choose hope over despair. The crowd erupted into applause. Frank stepped down, replaced by Iron Mom, who spoke about the Veterans Motorcycle Association's role in the efforts and their plans to replicate the success in other communities. As the speeches continued, Robert found himself surrounded by familiar faces, residents, volunteers, and even former Cobras who had turned their lives around. Hector clapped him on the back, grinning. "We did good, man," Hector said. "Never thought I'd say this, but I'm proud of us." Robert nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Me too." The highlight of the event came when the mayor's representative took the stage to present a plaque to the team. The plaque read, "In recognition of outstanding community leadership and dedication to restoration and unity." Robert stood alongside Frank, Iron Mom, Lisa, Danny, and Mac as the plaque was handed over. The crowd cheered wildly, their energy electric. "Thank you," Robert said into the microphone, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "This belongs to all of you. To every person who picked up a hammer, made a meal, or simply believed in the possibility of something better. This is for the town, for my dad, and for the future we're building together." As the day turned into evening, the celebration continued with music, dancing, and an overwhelming sense of joy. The small stage became a platform for local talent, with children reciting poems, veterans sharing stories, and even Mrs. Chen surprising everyone with a heartfelt song. Frank, sitting at one of the tables with Sarah, watched it all unfold with a sense of fulfillment. "This," he said softly, "is what your mother always dreamed of for this town. A place where people can thrive no matter their past." Sarah squeezed his hand. "And you made it happen, Dad. You gave them a reason to believe again." Robert joined them, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Frank and took a seat. "You know," Robert said, "I used to think I wasn't capable of anything good. But standing here today, I know that's not true." Frank placed a hand on his shoulder. "Redemption isn't about forgetting the past. It's about learning from it and using it to shape a better future. And you, my boy, are doing just that." As the stars began to fill the sky, the crowd gathered for a final toast. Frank raised his coffee cup high, his voice clear and strong. "To this town, to its people, and to the power of second chances. May we never stop building together." The crowd echoed his words, their cups raised in unison. The sound of their cheers filled the night, a celebration not just of their accomplishments, but of the bonds they had forged. And as the lights twinkled above the coffee stand, Robert looked out at the faces around him, each one a testament to the strength of community and the possibility of redemption. He felt a deep peace settle over him, knowing that this was only the beginning of a brighter future. The mountains stood silent witness to it all, their enduring presence a reminder that, like the town they sheltered, resilience and hope could withstand even the darkest of times.